Despite the political risks, unpopularity, and lack of compelling evidence, Republican Congressman and MAGA cultist Matt Gaetz is publicly urging an impeachment of President Biden and publicly threatening his own fellow Republican and Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, if Kevin McCarthy doesn't facilitate it. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, so this is interesting for a variety of ways because the political implications as we go into an election season, as 2024 rapidly approaches, are profound. Historically speaking, the Republican Party has closed ranks and fallen in line. The typical expression is that when it comes to candidates and policies and strategy, Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. And President Obama and other Democrats have for years complained about the circular firing squad of the left in the Democratic Party. But as we've also discussed over the past few years, particularly under President Biden's leadership, we have seen a bit of a reversal of that in which Democrats have been relatively cohered and unified, relatively, not perfectly, and certainly not in ways that the GOP used to be at its best. And the GOP in the past several years have been much more contentious and schismatic. And this clip kind of illustrates the point. So right now, despite the enormous unpopularity and the even greater lack of evidence to impeach President Biden, Matt Gaetz is publicly urging for an impeachment and is threatening his own party leader if Kevin McCarthy doesn't comply. Let's play the clip and we'll unpack it together.
I have traveled the country and spoken to so many Americans. They're disillusioned with House Republicans right now. They think that we have not put up a substantial battle to defeat the worst elements of this Biden administration. I worked very hard in January to develop a toolkit for us to be able to reorient the House of Representatives in a productive and positive way. I don't believe we've used those tools as effectively as we should have. And when we get back to Washington in the coming weeks, we have got to seize the initiative. That means forcing votes on impeachment. And if Kevin McCarthy stands in our way, he may not have the job long. So let's hope that he works with us, not against us. But we've got contingency plans in the event that he's not as productive.
Man, I'm so glad to hear you say that because it just frustrates me. And we give platform to a lot of folks out there, House Freedom Caucus guys, everybody. But we hear McCarthy out there saying, well, he hasn't done anything yet. Biden hasn't done anything yet to reach the level of impeachment or we're working on it. Enough of that. You guys clearly have enough evidence. We've all seen it. We've heard it. It's time to do something about it. And I think the voters are really getting frustrated.
Sorry for the lag in that clip. Hopefully the audio came through, but it was laggy on my end as well. Yeah, so a couple of things. So I have no idea who Matt Gaetz is talking to when he says he's going around the country and saying that, the GOP hasn't put up enough of a substantial fight against the Biden administration because that's all they're doing. They're not trying to work with House Democrats or the Senate or the Biden administration to pass meaningful legislation. They are reverting to, once again, being an obstructionist, bad faith, disloyal, authoritarian cult of personality. There's something, the GOP operates under the impression that when they become the minority party, they still don't have a responsibility to govern. Like, when they're in the majority, all they care about is cramming a young conservative into every judicial vacancy imaginable and creating tax cuts for the rich. Otherwise, again, they have no interest in materially improving the lives of the country or even their own constituents. And then when they're in the minority, they seem to think, well, all we have to do is, again, be that partner in the three-legged race who just drops to the ground and hugs the leg of the person trying to actually participate in the race. When in reality, a minority party, regardless of Democrat or Republican, you still have an obligation to help govern. Now, litigate your genuine disagreements. That's what the negotiation and debate process is for. But the idea that you're just supposed to kick back and block, that's ridiculous, but that's the GOP's mentality. So I don't know who Matt Gaetz is talking to, but I do know, according to polling, people are really fed up, including Republicans, with the Republican majority in the House of Representatives because it's all about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the laptop and Hunter Biden's genitalia and all the other things instead of producing material good for the American people, all right? So he might want to talk to different people if that's the case. In terms of the toolkit he's describing, so Matt Gaetz was one of the the holdouts during Kevin McCarthy's nomination process when he tried to become Speaker of the House, and it took an historic 18 times or something like that, if I remember correctly. Matt Gaetz was one of the holdouts, and Kevin McCarthy had to basically give away the farm to get the title of Speaker of the House. And one of the things he gave away was this idea of a motion to vacate the chair, which is like the American equivalent of, a vote of no confidence, in which you can trigger a vote very easily. You still have to get the vote, you still have to win the vote, but you can easily trigger a vote to remove the current leadership. So I think, if I remember correctly, it only takes one member to trigger a motion to vacate the chair, which basically grinds Kevin McCarthy's position to a halt. Then they have to vote on it, and he could potentially lose the speakership. So that is what Matt Gaetz is threatening there. Basically, if Kevin McCarthy doesn't fall in line and facilitate an impeachment, Matt Gaetz is threatening to try to get him kicked out of his position. Now, as we discussed, and we won't belabor the point too much, an impeachment's a terrible idea politically, because all they need is a simple majority in the House to impeach President Biden or impeach anybody. All you need is a simple majority to impeach. They do have the numbers if everybody voted for an impeachment. But we don't know that that's the case, because, as we've discussed before, there are 18 Republican congresspeople in the House of Representatives who are sitting in Biden districts. Okay, so the Republican Party in the House doesn't have an 18-person margin, right? So basically, those 18 would have to vote for an impeachment, knowing that their constituents also voted for President Biden, which carries huge political ramifications, especially given the lack of evidence. So there's no guarantee that they'd get the votes to impeach successfully. And as we discussed, there have been Republican congresspeople, let alone the Senate, but people in the House who are saying, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we have the evidence for it. This would be a terrible idea. Then, of course, you have to get a 2/3 majority vote in the Senate after the trial to have a conviction. They will never get that. So this is doomed to failure no matter what. It's either a non-starter, because they won't get the votes to actually impeach, but even if they do pull that off, it will not result in a conviction. And The Hill has a really good op-ed, really good description about how Kevin McCarthy faces a political minefield on the Biden impeachment, talking about, again, how he's trying to serve multiple masters at once: his constituents, his more moderate base, or his more moderate supporters in Congress, and then Donald Trump and the radical right in the Freedom Caucus. I have no sympathy for Kevin McCarthy, absolutely no sympathy whatsoever. He helped create this situation by not undermining Donald Trump and trying to course correct the GOP when he and McConnell and others had the chance. He allowed the situation to grow. So I think it's hilarious that he's in this position. He also faces the threat of a government shutdown on his watch. And historically speaking, generally speaking, when Republican Congresses have battled Democratic presidents, and their recalcitrance has created a government shutdown, usually the Republican Congress is blamed, because the shutdown's usually seen as an act of hyperpartisanship, or to try to extort the president into concessions that they couldn't otherwise get. So all of that is kind of like confluencing at one time. And, again, no sympathy for the GOP. It's an authoritarian cult of personality. It's bad faith as hell. And Kevin McCarthy played a role in this. So I think that we should all experience a bit of schadenfreude at his misfortune.